Welcome to my presentation on the risky business of information security. Because if a 10-minute PowerPoint presentation doesn't need to start with a good pun, I don't know what does. So why this topic? Why now? Because information security breaches seem to have become a constant in the news. Cathay Pacific just became the victim of the world's largest airline data breach, with hackers accessing personal information of 9.4 million customers. Earlier this month, Google exposed the personal information of hundreds of thousands of users of its Google+ social network, and Facebook has had not one, but two major breaches this year alone, affecting up to 90 million people. Uber, Saks Fifth Ave, MyFitnessPal, T-Mobile, and the list goes on, have all had information breaches. But what makes this relevant to my business being the government of BC, specifically the Ministry of Health, is that some cybersecurity groups predict that the healthcare sector will increasingly become a key target for cyber attacks, and the picture you see in front of you is consistent with that. It was part of an email I got this week warning me about malicious emails that are circulating within government. In this particular case, the email's goal was to make me feel bad about my workplace porn viewing habits, yes, porn viewing, and therefore click the link provided so that I somehow didn't get caught. This is exactly the type of email that could subject my employer to a potential information security breach, so I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail. But first, why do healthcare organizations make good targets for cyber attacks? Essentially, there are four main reasons. First, think about all the information the Ministry of Health has about you. Obvious things like your age and birth date, where you live, and your social insurance number, but they also have access to your entire medical history, diagnoses, prescriptions, lab work, surgeries, everything you've told your doctor or other healthcare provider in confidence. These things used to be written down or printed on a piece of paper, which meant that they were limited to whoever might be able to read the doctor's handwriting or walk by an open chart. Now, with electronic health records, this information is literally available at the click of a button from almost anywhere. And in terms of confidential government information, things like briefing notes, budgets before they're announced, any of the government's inner workings, these have the potential to harm their reputation if released. Second, the ministry has an annual operating budget of about $20 billion. You can do the math on this one, but attackers wishing to capitalize monetarily would find this highly desirable. Third, the ministry has approximately 1,300 staff, not including contractors, students, interns, and others that have access to personal and confidential information. The more potential access points an organization has, the higher their vulnerability. And fourth, the consequences are significant. Healthcare is a 24/7 business. It can't afford to have a disruption in services. Likewise, the government itself can't afford bad publicity from a disruption, so you can be assured that they're working hard to avoid that possibility. It's one thing to be a target, but how do we actually get from there to becoming a victim? And the answer to that is predominantly through the installation of malware. As most or all of you know, malware, or malicious software, is software that is intentionally designed to cause damage to a computer, server, or network. Although malware doesn't physically damage hardware, it can steal, encrypt, or delete data. It can also alter computer functions and spy on your computer activity without you knowing. There are many different kinds of malware that operate in slightly different ways. The most common kinds include viruses and worms, which infect and spread to other computers over a network, possibly destroying data as it goes; Trojan horses, which are disguised as something useful in order to trick you to letting it in; adware, which throws unwanted ads up onto your screen; and becoming more and more common is ransomware. Ransomware is different than many forms of malware in that it announces itself immediately, and it does so because it's demanding a ransom. It works by encrypting data on a computer or network, then displays a message to the user demanding a ransom be paid, usually in Bitcoin or some other untraceable currency, in exchange for decrypting the data and allowing the user to regain access. This leaves the user with two choices: pay the ransom or be forced to shut down their systems and reinstall everything using their most recent backups. As I mentioned earlier, healthcare is a 24/7 business. Downtime is hugely detrimental and avoided at all costs. However, this does point to why backups are critical, as is ensuring they are on a separate, secured drive. So how is malware distributed? Basically, anytime you're online, you're at risk of being exposed to malware. Web pages, online ads, music downloads, software from a less than reputable source can all be corrupted so that malware is installed on the user's device, and the hacker then has access to whatever information is on that computer and whatever that computer is connected to. By email, called a phishing email, the unexpecting person clicks on a link or opens an attachment, and that starts the process of downloading malware onto the computer. Here's an example of a phishing email I received a couple of weeks ago. This one was more reasonable than watching porn at work, as it tried to tap into a more common workplace paranoia, having unresolved email errors that will result in the loss of emails, contacts, and calendar entries. If this were to actually happen, it would be a significant liability professionally. The quote-unquote help desk email verification team wanted me to click on the link provided to review and verify my account status before all my data was purged. Attempting to create panic is common in these emails because people don't think clearly when they're panicking. But I didn't do that, and here's why. My employer has trained me not to open emails that I'm not expecting, particularly when the sender is unknown to me and/or is unclear. The other thing that was a giveaway was the email address. At first glance, it looks legit. BC government email addresses end with @gov.bc.ca. However, note that the order here has been reversed to @bc.gov.ca. Not a true address. Glad I didn't fall for it. But what makes cybersecurity important for both IT and non-IT managers to know about? The number one reason is education. Managers are an organization's direct access to its employees, and employees are what cybersecurity specialists refer to as the weakest link in the security chain. Research and experience consistently demonstrate that most data breaches in all types of organizations occur because people using that information, i.e. the employees, are not given the guidelines and education they need to recognize simple actions they could take to prevent breaches. Managers who model and demand best practice are least likely to have employees that initiate security breaches. And in cases where security breaches do happen despite best intentions, managers are the first people in the chain of reporting, so they need to be familiar with procedures and next steps so they can make this happen quickly and effectively. What is the BC government doing to prevent cyber attacks? For the most part, these are government-wide decisions rather than specific to the Ministry of Health, but they do need to consider the needs of each ministry independently. In the case of the Ministry of Health, cyber protection must balance the need for protecting personal and confidential health information against the need to share that information within government programs and the broader public sector. The Office of the Chief Information Officer is the central office responsible for the government's information security. Within it, there is an information security branch, which determines the appropriate level of risk the government is willing to take when it comes to protecting their information assets. They talk about this as maintaining a defensible level of security. Defensible security must be able to prevent, detect, and respond to the majority of attacks. Again, it's back to that balancing act. There are a finite number of resources, so decisions need to be made about how much of each resource to put toward upgrades and other security features, education, and so on. These are difficult decisions to make. How much should be spent preventing problems versus building capacity? You don't want to overspend, but if you underspend, you're increasing your liability. And in general, humans aren't great at prevention exercises simply because prevention is exciting 0% of the time. And that concludes this short presentation on cybersecurity and how it impacts the BC Ministry of Health. October was National Cybersecurity Awareness Month as well, so this topic seemed particularly relevant and was a good time to review some basics. Here are my primary references. Thanks for watching.